How's it going, everybody? Good evening. Welcome to the Pekiti Tirsia Tactical Association podcast. Today, we've got something really special. We've got the Tuhons of Pekiti Tirsia International, Tuhon Bill McGrath, and Pekiti Tirsia Tactical Association, Tuhon Jared Wihongi. Without further ado, here they are. Gentlemen, welcome to the podcast. How are you guys doing?
Awesome.
Hey, guys.
Right on. So let's jump right into it. You guys have decided to do this joint collaborative seminar. Talk to us about how this, first of all, how did this come about? What discussions happened leading up to this?
Back in 2019, I heard Jared was coming by in New York. Contacted him, said, let's get together, have lunch and talk. And I had wanted to do, ever since I retired, I'd been wanting to do joint seminars. I've done a few in the past. I did one with Mark Denny back in the mid-90s. And I'd done a few here and there. I've been doing a regular one in New York with the Acosta brothers, and I find them a lot of fun. So, I've been seeing Jared's work on video for the last few years. Very, very impressed by how he teaches things and how he goes about business. So I said, you know what? I should get together with him while he's here and see if we can put something together. And that's how it started. We were supposed to do it last October.
Yeah.
COVID hit.
Yeah, there's that whole pandemic thing.
Yeah.
Tuhon, Jared, talk to us about your motivation for wanting to do a joint seminar with someone like Tuhon Bill McGrath of Pekiti Tirsia International.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to a collaboration seminar within Pekiti Tirsia, there's a very short list of people that I would look at as being people that are the cream of the crop, the top of the top. So the people that you would want that for me are the pillars of Pekiti Tirsia Kali, and of course Tuhon Bill is one of those. And so it's for me, it's really. Every time I'm around people like Tuhon Bill, I kind of feel like I'm in the company of giants. These are people that have really set the stage for Pekiti Tirsia, obviously in addition to Grand Tuhon, but those that have helped to propagate the art and build the reputation. And so when I was in New York I was actually doing I was running a course at the Westchester County Police Academy, and when I was there, and Tuhon Bill contacted me and said, "Hey, you're in town. Let's get together." And I was, honored to do so. And we kind of, we hit it off, they kind of set the roots for Tuhon Bill contacting me a little bit later, for something we were supposed to do last year, and which obviously got pushed into this year, but it's for me, it's a no-brainer. This is, when someone like Tuhon Bill invites me to do something like this, I think it's good for me. It's just a privilege, but also it's good for the art. It's good for people to see, hey, we've got guys that are of this level that can get together and promote the art. And Paulie, as we've had discussions about this before, I think my philosophy is that I know what I'm capable of teaching, and I'm confident in that. But I also feel that the people that I teach will benefit from getting other experiences, other points of view of the art, and it just expands their knowledge and their ability to find their. I always talk about this. Pekiti Tirsia Kali has a lot of space for self-expression, right? And I express the art a certain way, Tuhon Bill express the art a certain way, and other individuals can find their way to express the art by exploring the ways that we teach, and other instructors also.
Yeah, martial arts, not just Filipino martial arts. There's this tendency that can exist where instructors sort of want to keep their students to themselves. Tuhon Bill, what's your philosophy as far as where and with who your students are allowed to train with?
Yeah, I mean, they're my students. They're not my kids, and they're not my, I don't know, I'm not a general in an army or whatever. I'm not a king. So yeah, when they ask me, Bill, can I go train with, and they barely get the words out of their mouth, and I say, yeah, sure. My feeling is the more people they're exposed to, the more the better idea they'll have of the technique and how to use it and how to train it and where to use it. And I have a couple of articles on learning through comparisons. And basically what you're doing is you're trying to solve the one problem, let's say with 3 different tools, and they might all be, say, let's say cutting tools, but you'll see how different cutting tools will solve a similar problem. And it really, even if you don't carry those tools, it'll give you a better understanding of the tools you do carry.
Right.
So I just think in general, we used to have a regular thing at my summer camps where we would get someone else would do the warm-up. A different person would do the warm-up on the 2nd and 3rd day of the summer camp, just so people can get an idea of different ways of doing things. We've invite, different people in the group to do different sections of it. It's good for the students. It's good for the teachers. It's, you can't be too parochial about it. You can't be too close-minded about it.
Right.
It's not good for the students, for their learning ability. And it's not good just plain business sense. This is the 21st century, guys. It's not a cult. You can't close people off from exposure to other things.
Well, speaking of exposure, was there a moment, and I'll ask both of you this, was there a moment in your trajectories and your studies of Pekiti Tirsia where you may have crossed paths in the past?
Well, we almost did. I did a seminar in 1999 in Hawaii.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, and Jared was there, living there. And
I actually showed up.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. We were supposed to be every day.
John Bill just left.
Yeah. Well, what happened was we were supposed to be every day under a banyan tree by the Honolulu Zoo or something. And we decided, I don't know, I got talked into renting a room at a place so we'd have one day indoors in case it got too hot or whatever. And I ended up switching, but we didn't have Facebook and the internet was very rudimentary then. And I wasn't able to get the word out so Jared could hear it. So he showed up on time to where we were the day before and the day after that, and not that day. I felt really bad for that when he told me.
What was that day like for you, Jared?
Well, I mean, I didn't really know the details of that until we actually met, and then we were discussing, and I was like, "Were you in Hawaii at this time?" And then I found out the story behind it. But at that time I was a sponge. I had started training DTS, Pekiti Tirsia Cerradas, and I was, that gave me an interest in Pekiti Tirsia, and I saw a flyer. I don't even remember where, but I was living in Hawaii, go to university. I was actually teaching Kali classes as an extracurricular program through the school at the time, and my limited knowledge at the time compared to now. But and I saw this flyer somewhere about that of the seminar, and I showed up, and I was like, I guess it was canceled or something because nobody's here.
Yeah, I ever since you told me about that, I really feel bad.
And I'm glad you remembered that because I forgot we had even discussed that when we met. But that was. What
was your impression? What was your impression of Tuhon Bill back then?
Well, I mean, it was so back then. I had seen this flyer. I didn't have any information. It wasn't probably a couple of years later that I had seen a video with Tuhon Bill, and it was probably, as I think back about it, I think it might have been a 64 text video or one of Tuhon Bill. You might this was in the early 2000s when I actually saw one of your videos.
Yeah, because I'm thinking now you didn't have YouTube until what 2004 or 5.
Yeah.
You didn't have Facebook till 2008.
No, this was a VHS tape that I had gotten a hold of.
Yeah, this is a VHS back in the 90s. I only had VHS. Yeah. Back then I was actually making. I had the first video I made was a guy had a VHS camcorder. He used a full-size VHS tape as its recording media. I had to take that, put it in 2 VHS decks in my house to make copies. And that's how I sent out videos in those days.
Wow.
Yeah.
Jared, how old were you in 99?
What's that?
Summer of 1999.
Okay.
How old were you?
How old was I? 26.
Oh, my.
I was 26. Yeah.
I really feel bad.
I was
He's
26
standing
at the
there under that tree, thinking he was going to get some knowledge.
I'd been to Hawaii twice before, and I should remember the weather is, unless you had a hurricane, the weather's perfect there all the time.
Yeah,
I don't know why somebody talked me into getting indoors with air conditioning,
Well, at the time when I was living in Hawaii, the only local place that I could get any FMA training was some of the Lagusa schools that were close to where there was a school in Haleiwa where close to where I was living in Laie, going to university, and the closest place, and I didn't have a car most of the time I was there, so I had to catch buses around. But there was a guy teaching Lagusa Kali and I think he was a student of Greg Lantayao, sorry. But anyway, there was not a lot of opportunities where I was living on the island to train. So anytime I saw something like that, I would just jump all over it. But yeah, and back to your question, Paulo, when I don't remember what year that was that I saw one of Tuhon Bill's videos. It may have been even my friend Ray, who had his immense collection of videos that would share them with me when I would train with him. But I was very impressed. Not just a lot of it was just the very methodical. The methodology was very analytical and
right,
and in a precise manner that kind of broke things down. And so I was obviously impressed when I was exposed to some of Tuhon Bill's material back in the early 2000s. Yeah.
Right on. Well, we're going to be talking about methodology in just a second here. But first, for those who aren't Pekiti Tertians, who may just be getting into Filipino martial arts right now, and they're hearing about this joint seminar, can each of you take a moment to sort of paint us the picture about why this can be characterized as historic or valuable for a practitioner of the Filipino martial arts?
Want me to start? Okay. Well, I started training with Grandmaster Guy Hay in 1975 and continued until he left for the Philippines in 1990. So I have the perspective of GT for short, Grand Tuhon for short. I have a perspective of training under him in the 70s and 80s, let's say. And then when he moved back to the Philippines, he changed a lot of things. He modified a lot of things. And so the guys who trained in that period are going to have a different perspective. And I would consider, from my viewpoint, Jared is one of the best guys who trained under GT under that time period. Jared, when did you start training with Leo?
2000. So I started training with his uncle,
Nene
Tortal in 96. And then it was 2000 that I made that transition from Pekiti Tirsia to Pekiti. So, yeah.
Yeah. So, I've been, I've been practicing Pekiti since 75. I've been teaching it. The first time Leo sent me on a seminar was to California in 79. So I've been teaching it a very, very long time to a wide variety of people, civilian martial artists, law enforcement, military. My military experience is much more limited than Jared's among teaching. I think I've only had one official military group that was in Asia a few years back. But most of the military guys, especially in the early 80s, were combat vets of Vietnam who really had an interesting perspective on things. And some guys had, how to do center removal and different things with blades. And it was good to get feedback from them on, this stuff is serious. It came from people who know what they're doing.
Right.
So I'm looking at Jared's material, how he's teaching, and he is really doing an excellent job translating a very big system that was really designed for family art in the Philippines, to bring it into the 21st century for law enforcement people, for military people. That's why I really deliberately chose, one guy that I thought was the best out of the Philippine learned group, the more modern group under GT, to communicate with and to try to do a joint seminar. Because I get people ask me questions about, what was this like? Was that like? And I think it's a really good opportunity for people who trained from 1990 on to see how the old material was with me. And then for my guys to see how, someone like Jared, who's really fine-tuned this really well, how to take that big material that's in the classic Pekiti Tirsia and fine-tune it down to specific groups.
Jared, what might you have to add to that?
No, I mean, it kind of pretty much sums it up. I mean, it's as Tuhon Bill mentioned, when I came into the art, there had been some evolutions that Grand Tuhon had made, and so I came in at a different generation, a different era, and then I, in turn, based on my my professional experience working with police, working with military contracts and whatnot, have in turn made some methodology modifications to the art and the methodology of how I like to relay it. And so, even people within the PTTA, a lot of people come into the art because they know I teach a specific methodology. There's this, people often come into the art and they're like, we want to learn some tactical application of the art. But at the same time, a lot of these people, once they delve into it, they start to have an interest in the classical Pekiti Tirsia, the ways it was taught, and the methodology that is a more academic approach to the art. And so when they have that interest, that's where they're going to glean a lot of knowledge from Tuhon Bill and the way that he was, he learned the art, the way that he's formulated it and put some methods to it based on his way of teaching the art. And that's where people are going to benefit more than they would from learning that from me. Even within the PTTA, when people want to learn that as an organization, I usually tend to send them to Tuhon Kit because he's put a lot of research and training with the different Tuhons and how he likes to teach it. It's not because I don't like that part of the art. I love it. I think it's amazing. I love the academic and the academic approach to learning the art. But when people invite me for seminars, they're not looking for that. They want, Jared, we want to learn your tactical approach to the art. And so I end up spending most of my time committed to teaching a specific way, but not because I don't have interest in the more the classical elements of the art. It's just because that's what people know me for, I guess you could say. Yeah.
Very fascinating, guys. I'm going to play a video. I'm going to play one video of Jared and one video of Tuhon Bill, and I'd like to just get your immediate impressions. All right, like what goes through your mind. So first, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to play this video from Tuhon Bill. I got it off your Facebook page. The mics are live still, by the way.
And this is for the 2016 right in France, the advertising one. That's a 1988 camp in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm
going to lower it down there.
Yeah, that's a good idea. That's October of 96 in Hanover, Germany at the Kempelkon school. That was the last time I saw Leo face to face.
Oh, wow.
I didn't realize that was the Kempelkon. I've taught there also. At the new one anyway. Not maybe this is a different.
Yeah, that's the same building. It's just got a different color scheme. There's Oliver Nichols and I in the parking lot at the Kempelkon.
Oh, it is, yeah.
This is Vegas in 2000. That's Zach Whitston I'm working with. There's Jack Latour in the mask.
Yeah, I can tell it's Jack.
Yeah.
Even with a mask on.
This is 87 or 88 in New Mexico. When Leo, you see him in the back in the red, he got inducted into the Karate Hall of Fame.
You got to grow that beard back.
Yeah, it's a different color now. There's AK Baraka.
Oh, I've heard of this guy.
Yeah, I think this is around 1990.
I've trained with AK, yeah, good guy.
Yeah, I think it's Jersey, I want to say. We were filming some demo material. Very strong guy.
Yeah.
Is he still around?
I still see him. I mean, I see him on Facebook, I think.
So
That's Barry Dealey, one of the guys from back in those days. This was in Brazil, in Sao Paulo, Brazil. That I think is in Long Island.
Here we go. Hey, we're gonna go to Tuhon. Jared, what are your impressions when you see like a highlight reel like that?
That's awesome, and that's the kind of stuff that attracts people to the art, And it's just the crispness, the preciseness of the movements, and I think that's that for me anyway. When I was my passion for the Filipino martial arts stuff was growing. It was seeing videos like that. I was like, man, I got to keep training this stuff. It's cool. Yeah.
Absolutely. Tuhon Bill, you see a video highlight of that spanning, so many years. What goes through your mind when you watch this, timeline of your time spent in the art?
I used to have a really nice head of hair. No, I used to, I'm thinking, it's hard to see there, but honestly, I was the least athletic guy of the senior guys learning on the Leo.
Wow.
And the guy with no prior martial art training. So in order to compete with those guys, I really had to understand the technique better. I wasn't Superman and I wasn't the Flash. So I figured out the only guy I could be was Batman. So I tried to be Batman. If that makes any sense. Oh, that's me again.
Yeah, no, I'm just as you're talking. I mean, you're wearing a suit here, brother. That's pretty slick.
It was an award ceremony, and then Leo says get up and do demos. So okay,
it's very James Bond.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's move on to the next video. Here it is.
Very professional.
Pekiti Tirsia is the art of the living past in modern times. Not bound by constraints of tradition, we strive to maintain relevance by evolving our practice to meet the threats of today. We believe the nature of combat is the utilization of weaponry, and believe the body can become the weapon. Our journey has been followed by warriors from time immemorial. I seek for knowledge. I give my respect to the fighting arts. I present the hand of peace above the hand of war. I give loyalty to the loyal. I am prepared.
All right.
Very cool.
This line keeps coming up. Tuhon Bill, what do you think about this idea that Pekiti Tirsia is the art of the living past in modern times? What does that mean to you?
Guys, honestly, it's very hard for me to comment on that because I grew up with Leo saying things like that all the time.
Yeah.
And he uses very flowery language. Leo's first wife, Isabel, and the three girls at the time, no, two girls at the time, were in the 70s sitting next to my father and mother at one of the tournaments. And Leo's introducing all the dignitaries and everyone there at the tournament and using very flowery language and long, long, long words. And Leo's wife turns to my father and says, "Do you understand what he's saying?"
Some of it makes sense, though, doesn't
It
it?
makes sense. Some of it makes sense, but I say that please don't read too much into it.
Yeah, for sure.
It's I'm trying to say this diplomatically. Just look at the technique and the people doing the technique. Don't go too crazy with stuff.
Got it.
It sounds good, but it's hard for me living on the inside. I always call them Leo. Go to his house, hang out at the house, watch TV together. You know, it's a different environment I'm coming from.
Yeah, I understand.
But
Well, 200. What does that mean?
Answer that better, probably.
What does that mean to you? That Pekiti Tirsia is the art of the living past in modern times.
If kind of for me, the way that resonates for me is, you know, which is for me part of the beauty of the art is this is a historic art, you know, a historic combat art, and of which we train a lot of the historic components of the art. You know, a lot of the stuff that we train is not necessarily going to be the most direct application for modern day self-defense, but you can see, you know, if you kind of look at, you know, the history of martial arts in general, right? No matter what civilization you go into, if you go back far enough and you look at what the warriors were training, they had weapons in their hands, right? No one went to protect their village with their empty hands. If they're not around to tell the story anymore, if they did, it was the ones that trained with weaponry. So every martial art in every culture goes back to a weapon-based martial art. And so the Pekiti Tirsia, the Filipino martial arts in general, still have that kind of that feel to them. You know, this is the way that warriors trained back in the day, and they still train that way. You know, we begin our training with weapons, and so there's that historical component to it. But a lot of the historical ways of training, like I mentioned, don't always have the most direct application. They're still relevant if you just know how to make them relevant. We still learn valuable things. You know, I'm not walking around with a stick and a knife, you know, as self-defense tools necessarily, but can I learn to use things in my hands as weapons, improvised weaponry, things of that nature? Absolutely. Can they be symmetric, asymmetric weapon systems? Absolutely. Can I learn all these valuable things? If I know how to make that art relevant to today, then it still has a lot of application. And so I think that's, for me, when I hear that expression, it's basically there's a historic element to it that has modern relevance if you know how to train and apply it. Yeah.
But you also don't disagree with Tuhon Bill in that Grand Tuhon was very poetic with his language.
He's very, and sometimes he says things that are like, where is he going with that? And other things, it's like, man, that was very philosophical. You know, so you've got that kind of both sides of that, and you're trying to. And whenever he would say something very flowery, you're like, is that like just a crazy thing he just said, or does that actually have some deep? If I really think about it, there's some deep relevance to it, and oftentimes it does. If you kind of think it, and he even told me one time, he was like, people always think, you know, tell me, Leo, you're crazy, you know, you're a crazy guy, and he's like, and he knows that, he knows he's got that reputation, and one time he told me that he part of the reasoning for that, not always, and maybe not in the context of what we're discussing, but in a related thing, he's trying to train people's mind also, because the self-defense is more about the physical components. You know, there's a lot of mindset involved with the ability to defend your, self-defense in general. Self-defense oftentimes requires the use of violence on other human beings, and if you're not prepared to do that, then all the training is for naught if you're not as far as application to self-defense. And so a lot of times he's training people's mindset to be ready to defend themselves or those they love, and which means getting past some moral inhibitions that sometimes we have as human beings as far as committing violence against another individual.
Moral inhibitions.
If I could, I'll make two comments on that, a funny one and then a serious one.
Okay.
The funny one is very classic Leo. We were doing a demo and a spotted dagger, and he's deflecting my strikes and whipping the blades by my head, and you destroy his eyes, you break every tooth, and he throws me on the ground, and then comes in, and then you enjoy your special something. And you could see the people's faces like, what did he just say? But the serious part is, when we were doing bag work, he would have us visualize the injury to the person, the successful completion of the technique. Let's say you're hitting and trying to break a bone. So break the bone, hear the bone break the bone, break, So, and what you're doing is a little bit of self-hypnosis. You are seeing yourself successfully complete the job. You're getting that visual feedback. Obviously, you're imagining it, but part of that visualization is very important. He'd tell you to hear the sounds of the bones breaking. If you were practicing with a training knife on a tire, he'd say, see the blood, see the blood. He's trying to desensitize you to things. And part of it is visualizing the successful completion of what you're doing, and part of it is desensitizing you, especially in a culture that does not hunt and fish all the time, does not slaughter animals, regularly for food for your family. Seeing a little bit of blood for a modern person can be very traumatic. Hearing a bone break can be very traumatic. He used to go and regularly do knife tapping training drills with people. The very first time they would do it, he'd pull out a live blade and do knife tapping. But what he didn't tell you is a lot of times you'd see him. Well, first off, he's feeding you. And I don't think I can. You won't be able to see with a dark one. Hold on. So, single edge knife, right? You see the knife, the edge is pointed away from my hand. So if he's feeding you on a backhand and a forehand and a low line thrust, he's keeping the back of the blade towards you. Even more so, he's got his thumb out. So you have that buffer zone of how many inches here between your hand and the blade. And he'll get you descend, and you're like, he's feeding you. And if you make a mistake and don't get the block, he converts that into a fake and goes around a different angle. He doesn't stab you, or rarely stabs you. I have to play it that way because I got one over here. I got one over here.
Wow.
We had one guy stabbed in the thigh. I think it was before I got there. The older guy was telling me about it. Buried it right. Leo felt he had a bayonet. Felt it hit the bone, pulled it out of his quadricep, and the blood started to spurt out. They had to rush him to the emergency room. But that was very rare.
Well,
He's trying to desensitize you to the sight. He said the first time you see a knife and you're afraid of a knife should be in the school, not on the street. And then after that, he'd be the only one who could use a live knife in training. Everyone else had to use we used to have rattan, just cut over rattan's bit then. So everyone else had the practice, if you're practicing with each other, with just a fake knife, because you don't want you getting cut. So a lot of what he did when he said things, he says things in demos to be memorable and flowery and get people's attention. But he was actually training you. The things you would say in training were actually very deliberate, very smart, very calculated to get you to a certain place in your training. I'm sure Jared would concur. I'm sure he says things like that to you.
Yeah.
Training is very different than demos.
Have you been stabbed by Grand Tuhon?
I'm ashamed to say that no, I have not been stabbed by Grand Tuhon, thankfully. But no, to the point that you're making, Tuhon Bill, that's exactly kind of what he articulated to me, is that a lot of that craziness, you're talking about stabbing people in the eye and flipping it up and then eating it and letting them see what you had for breakfast and stuff like that. It's a mindset thing to kind of desensitize, because and it's it's in so not exactly same methodology, but it's the same thing that police and military will do to train people to be prepared for violence, and so it's the same idea, just maybe a little different way of doing it, going about it, but inoculating people to those types of eventualities.
Well, sticking with training methodologies and with consideration to what you may have learned from Grand Tuhon, along with your personal experiences, both personal and professional, how do you approach a seminar like this? What teaching methodologies will you employ to ensure that the participants there aren't just getting a bunch of stories about the past. How do you ensure that they actually walk away with something of value to them?
Shall I go first?
Go for it.
Please,
Yeah,
please.
please.
So my plan is to go in, assuming that everyone there is experiencing the Tirsia, either from my group or from Jared's group. And I'm going to teach the teachers how I teach. This is what I learned at this time, and this is why I believe it is taught this way. And a lot of times Leo would tell me years later, this is why you do this way. And here are the pros and cons of doing it this way. This is how I would teach it to a beginner, and this is how I would teach it to an advanced person. So a lot of it is teaching methodology. And I'm not going to do a lot of high reps with these guys. I want to try to go through a lot of material, but at every point show why I teach it this way to this type of group. I think they can get my funny stories off my videos or my blog posts. You know, they're there for what they can get hands-on, face-to-face.
So there's a big element of what you intend to present to be for instructors and teaching how to teach the art of Pekiti Tirsia, which is a tenet of Pekiti Tirsia.
Yeah, that's
is it not?
Say again.
It's like a tenet of Pekiti Tirsia to learn to teach to learn.
Yeah.
Yes.
Go ahead, Jared. What's your idea on this?
Well, if people come to hear me tell funny stories, they're going to be sorely disappointed because I might have stories, but none of them are funny. So
it's funny in its own way.
But all I can do is teach the art. I've got no funny stories, but no, I think for me, you know, it's kind of achieves two things. One is, you know, I teach how I was taught, and like we discussed earlier, I come from another generation, and there was a heavy emphasis on tri-V methodology, and so I will teach, you know, that focused on how I was taught, and so that's going to be one thing. But the other part of that is how a lot of times people that train with me, and again something I mentioned earlier, people are looking for the, you know, I use the term loosely, the tactical application of the art and so on and so forth, and it kind of they go hand in hand, because you know, a lot of the philosophy of the tri-V methodology is a little more more direct to application of the art, and less breaking it down to an academic approach, which has pros and cons. And so I'm not saying that's, you know, the way. It's a way to learn the art. And so they go hand in hand. The application and the tri-V methodology are two things that, you know, that people look to me if they're interested in learning something from me. That's usually what it is. And so I'll put some focus on that area also. Yeah.
Hey, there's something about the tri-V which I found interesting. The guys had asked me about that who had trained under me and also did training under Leo. And excuse me if I slip and I say Leo, that I grew up saying that's how I referred to the guy. You know,
same for me when I call you Bill and Jared, by the way.
Yeah, exactly.
No disrespect meant whatsoever.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry, guys. But some of it puzzled me because it was so different from the way I learned. And speaking to the guys who had trained under me and started out actually under Leo in the 90s and 2000s and went to the Philippines. Once they told me who it was designed for, what type of group, at what time of period, etc., then it made perfect sense. I'll give you two examples. One is, and I saw this a lot in the training with the Marines or Rangers in the Philippines, the military guys in the Philippines. There's a lot less sidestepping and footwork than I was used to. And sidestepping in particular was so heavily emphasized with my training. It wasn't with those guys. And then, you know, somebody reminded me, you know, those guys are walking through the jungle, walking point. You know, they're clearing the brush out of the way so you don't get whatever nasty insects go over and bite you and whatever. So you get to start the fight with a bolo in your hand, but you got a backpack on that weighs a third or more of your body weight. You sidestep with that thing, and you don't wind up on the back like a turtle.
Yeah.
The other thing was, a lot of the swings is going to be hard to see on a small camera, but Leo has always emphasized with us a lot of using that trapezius muscle as a fulcrum and levering it down, keep your strikes tight. Where I saw a lot of the Tri-V guys lifting this up and then dropping it down. Well, I remember back when I was a kid, how many times I bopped myself in the back of the head trying to make these tight strikes, or scrape my ear trying to make these tight strikes. The first, month or two of training, you'd whack yourself at least once, which is fine if you're a 14-year-old boy with a rattan stick and your teacher says, do this 1,000 times, and you're probably not going to get a fight with a stick, until the tournament next year. But if you're in the Army and you might get into a fight with a sword right after your 2-week training camp, and you got 2 weeks to learn this thing with all your military gear on, well, it's probably not a good idea to have them fight with that nice and tight strike, which is perfectly good and the right way to do it if you got a kid training and you got all these years before he's going to get into a real fight. But if that guy might get into a fight, tomorrow, and you got him a little window of time to train him, and this is a small part of all the other training he has to do, then that type of striking makes perfect sense.
Now, Tuhon, Jared, how did Grant Tuhon first characterize this change to Tri-V methodology? Did he even refer back to the way in which he used to teach it? But how is it explained to you?
In the early days, when I first started training with him, he would use the term academic schools, and then he would use the term fighting schools. Okay, either way, you're learning to fight. So that's just how he would term it. He would talk it, and I think what he meant by that was an academic approach to learning the art, and a more let's just learn like Tuhon Bill was just articulating. Let's just learn the fundamentals of how to fight first, and then later on, if you're going to keep training, we can fill in some of those gaps. And I think that's kind of the what he was articulating with. If back in the early 2000s, people that were training in Pekiti Tirsia back then, you remember that Grant Tuhon was naming every school around the country the pit bulls. There was the New York pit bulls, and we were the Mountain West pit bulls, and there was the pit bulls here, and he had this fascination with and if you know Grant Tuhon, he loves dogs, and he had a bunch of pit bulls at his home in Negros. But he just that he called these his pit bull schools that were more direct to the fight, and so I think that is Grant Tuhon did refer to it the academic schools, and I think it's just. For me, they're not mutually exclusive. The way that I like to teach is how I was taught. I like the Tri-V methodology because that's just the way I was trained. But once people learn those functional fight application up front, and I encourage it, fill in the gaps, go back and start taking the academic approach, and let's start refining that a little bit and going back to some of the older ways. So it's just a different approach to getting to that same destination. But yeah, it's definitely it wasn't something that was hidden. It was like, I used to teach like this, now I teach like that. It was very upfront. This is how I taught that, and I would even pump him for information when I was early training with him, and like can we train some of this stuff that I know about? And he's like, no, I don't teach that anymore. He didn't want it. He wasn't uninterested in teaching some of these older ways that he used to teach. But like I said, I think it all complements, and it's from my experience, it's the early progressions in training that are the difference. It's just how you might, your day one through X number of months. But once you'll arrive at a point where you're actually going to be training the same stuff eventually. I even saw, I mentioned my friend who has a whole collection of videos, Mandala Ray Smith, but he shared with me a video years ago of a seminar. I don't know how he got it, but it was a seminar that Grant Tuhon did in Chicago in the 80s. And in the video, Grant Tuhon is teaching Tri-V methodology. he's teaching the 5, 8, and 9 as the foundation for what he was teaching these guys. The 5, 8, and 9 is what we call the 1, 2, and 3, the triangle, the center line, right, forehand and backhand. And he was teaching that as the platform for the seminar section that I saw. And for me, that was kind of eye-opening that, it's not new. He was teaching that, but if you're teaching a seminar, it's hard to run through a full big methodology. You got to kind of find something in 2 days that you can give to these people. And he was teaching this methodology in the 80s in a different context. So it was kind of eye-opening.
Yeah. Go back and look, and I'm working on an article on it now of the way Leo learned the art compared to how he taught it in the 70s, and then how I teach at different groups now. And the idea of that is he learned it. It was structured for, originally supposed to start the boy, his boys back then, at 7 years old. Do a year of footwork. The story why Leo did 3 years instead. And then you would do a year of the abecedario. So this is an 8-year-old boy now. He's just done a year of footwork, only footwork drills. Now, what can you give an 8-year-old boy? He's just doing targets on a tree, right? And he's striking the targets on a tree, and you learn one set per month. When you're the second month, you're doing 24 techniques, but you're 12 new and 12 old, right? But they're built on each other. And you're basically hitting with either a mirror image of the other strikes or a different part of the stick, right? If you tell a 12-year-old boy, I'm going to give you 144 strikes, their eyes are going to glaze over. You say, you're going to give you 12. Oh, I can do 12. Sure, that's easy. He learned, at least this is what he told us. He learned all the solo material, solo stick and sword, A through Z, before going to double A. Learned all the double A through Z before going to spotted dagger. Learned all the spotted dagger, then went all through the knife, then went all through the hand. When he came to the U.S. in 73, he couldn't teach like that because, he couldn't teach adults like that because they wouldn't want that. They wanted knife, they wanted empty hands, wanted this and that. When I started with him, the first 6 months I was in a kids class, we just did kickboxing. It wasn't part of the main group. And then when a real karate school moved down the block, everybody left except me and my buddy, and we stayed. And then we kind of ended up in the adult class that he was doing off-site because he had nowhere else to put us. So we kind of ended up in the adult class there. And those guys you were getting single stick first. You were getting empty hand versus knife. They were also getting some kickboxing too. But you had it, when Leo was teaching Americans in the US, instead of A through Z of each weapon category, he was kind of teaching to a certain extent all the A's and then all the B's, all the C's. Right? When I first started teaching by myself, I was pretty much following that format. Basically, if you look at the PTI Blue Book, it shows the order of techniques as I learn them. So that's why the categories are like that. If I was going to do it again, I'd probably do it all the A's, all the solo first, then double A, etc. When I teach law enforcement or military, it's very much like Jared is doing with the Tri-V or the other compressed systems that the guys are doing, in that when I teach empty hand versus knife to law enforcement, I'm giving them, I think we discussed this last time, chain techniques. So I'm giving them what I would do against a specific attack. This is the first thing, second thing, third thing. So they get exposed to the technique and perhaps learn the theory of why we're doing this through assimilation, but you can't have time to give them a lot of material.
Does this sound familiar to you, Jared, this training methodology specific to, a finite amount of time and
Absolutely.
teaching a specific group of professionals?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. It's, the methodology has to be more direct. But in addition to that, as something that, Paulo, I know that you're aware of, the way I like to approach that is, okay, let's let's get the, more, let's narrow down, what we're trying to train here. Let's get more direct to, we still might have some drills in there, simple drills that kind of build, that can give people a little bit of coordination with how they're going to be defending, because timing is important. You're trying to intercept and attack. But then from there, let's explore some of the, and in the TRICOM methodology, I call it the T. What is the termination here? And let's explore, using a Pekiti Tirsia countermeasure, how I can fight my way to a point where I can now maybe access my firearm, maybe access another weapon that maybe I can use that moment to tactically disengage or facilitate a Pekiti-based takedown or a weapon takeaway. So, that everything is in the context of how we train with Pekiti Tirsia, and then I'll just blend in the viable, extremely viable options, particularly in a law enforcement environment, for an individual to kind of find the ultimate outcome, the favorable outcome of that encounter.
Absolutely, and I guess that's where you guys converge. You both, Tuhon, Bill, you have a law enforcement background as well, and I was going to ask. I actually wrote it down about how both of your law enforcement backgrounds influence the way you teach the art of Pekiti Tirsia. I think I got the answer there. So for the people who have stuck around, we're 10 minutes to the hour here. I want to ask some very specific questions. Answer it how you will. But are there closed fist punching in Pekiti Tirsia?
I learned it that way.
Really?
Yeah.
There is?
Yeah. Leo was very specific with things. He had specific targets. He had specific sets. He had... actually, we talked about this in our last interview. Leo's punches had a downward angle or a side upward angle on the straight fist. I mean, hammer fist is different. Hammer fist is hammer fist. But the idea was you use gravity to help you. If you hit a slight downward angle, the body can't compress as fast as you hit, and he absorbs more force. Leo's idea was, if you hit him straight in, if he moves, you've lost some power there. It's like hitting with a pointy bullet as compared to hollow point. When you hit him upwards, gravity's tethering him to the ground a bit, and you're getting more force imparted that way, because you're not lifting the guy up. He's not a air balloon.
Where did this idea come from? How is this implanted in my head that there's no?
People have mentioned that, I think, online, and I've modified stuff. Because I think we talked about it. You and I, we talked about the AIDS problem. The cross for Leo was not full in the head. It's hard for me to show it. Let's show it this way. It was at a downward angle on the jaw. You're supposed to snap the guy's head down. Because the knockout really occurs not by you crushing the skull, by the skull moving at high velocity and smacking the brain. But I stopped doing that in the early 80s and converted the target to the upper sternum, so you stay away from the teeth. You don't either break your fingers or even just cut your knuckles, the skin on the broken teeth, and you wind up with blood-to-blood transfer.
So you modified Pekiti Tirsia based on what was happening during that time, right? The HIV and AIDS epidemic. That's interesting. It's very much an alive thing. Tuhon, Jared, punching?
Yes. But
there is punching,
and it's not just I did learn both from Grant Tuhon. I learned the capabilities of hitting with the open hand, and what the open hand is capable of, and the reasons why sometimes it's a good idea. But at the same time, I learned and did train closed hand punching techniques with Grant Tuhon also. So the notion that there are no punches, and it's just maybe an individual's interpretation of it, but that's not from the source. That's not from the source. Yeah.
All right. So the next one, I'm going to go to Tuhon Bill. What do you know about Sabayan? What do you know about Call de Mama? Is it in your curriculum? If not, what is its
I only started seeing it, I think, with the video from you guys. And actually, that's one of the things that most got me interested in talking to Jared, because he did it the best and the most practical to me. He had proper footwork. I really did not like the guys who just stood toe to toe with their hands moving very fast and their faces right here, and their They're not getting off the X. They're right in that sharp fan blade of the knife going around. And Leo from day one was always emphasizing with us that's a blade. If you do a piece of handwork, you do a piece of footwork to get you off of his intended glide path with the knife. And I'll be honest with you, Jared was the only one of the guys who were doing the Koldamama drill with blades that had proper footwork. And I think what I heard from you, Jared, is Leo didn't tell you to do it that way. You did it instinctively from the things you learned previously. But I mean, maybe in law enforcement and the other martial art background you had, you just knew don't stand on the X as a knife here. But I didn't learn that particular drill. We learned different things. Go ahead, guys.
Sorry, Tuhon Bill. The second part of that question was, how do you, from what you gather from that drill, how does PTI craft those skill sets? Before I go with Tuhon, Jared.
There are pieces in there that are like our other techniques you see. There's a low block here.
Yeah.
I've seen some people do as a static block. The way that Jared does it is very similar to the way we do a tertiary parry in knife tapping. If the guy comes in the 5 line and your primary and he fakes you out and that's coming in, then that little stop hit is there to give you time to get offline. You're not relying on that hand of your tricep muscle and your bones, which may not be as strong as his, to stop his bicep deltoid pectoral muscle coming in an uppercut. You know, for us, it was a delaying action and a fence or a force field to push you back offline to get outside the circle of his attack. And Jared does it that way. To me, that's the right way to do it. And then there are other things. I mean, a lot of it looks like little things you might do in sparring to buy yourself time to get out. Jared's getting offline, the other guys aren't. And to be perfectly honest with you, that's what I like about Jared's stuff. He does things of the new material the way I would do them because they seem more practical. And I'll leave it at that.
Your response to that, Tuhon, Jared?
I mean, yeah, it's really, you know, when you look at Pekiti Tirsia Kali and you look just break it down philosophically, we don't stay in center line, right? We try and find an angle that gives us a point of domination, a point of relative advantage. And so even within the context of the Koldamama drill, if you're, you know, there should always be side to side movement. I'm moving in, I'm moving out, but I'm never staying in that central line, and that's essential. And you know, and the way that I like to articulate this sometimes is, you know, Pekiti Tirsia Kali is an outside line fighting system. We always try and seek the outside of the outside of line, but we need to train other positions out of reality because you can't always dictate positioning. So if you don't train your points of priority, then that's not going to become instinct. My instinct should be to move in a particular direction. But if I haven't trained, okay, what if based on the proximity of the attack or the timing or so on and so forth, what if I just can't move there in time? Well, now you've got some other things that help you to one, survive that position and then potentially move you to another direction, another location. And so I think it's not just doing the drills, but understanding the tactics behind them and why we train the footwork in the ways we do and you know, and the importance of it. I think it has to be become instinctive. And so that drill in and of itself, this terminology's changed a little bit since 20 some odd years ago, where I started learning it, because the more common term now is sabayan for that particular drill. Back then it was all just Koldamama, and you know, but now Koldamama is more referring to, as I questioned Grand Tuhon on why the change in terminology, that's referring to the double knife variation of the drill versus the other, you know, because when I first learned the platform, we did it spadi dagger, we did it double dagger, we did it empty hand, we did it single dagger and single stick. So we did it with all the different weapon platforms and gleaned some, you know, some benefits out of the drill.
2 points there. One is you have your preferred move, and then you should be able to fight in the non-preferred areas. and strike from the non-preferred angles. And into that, there was one study, maybe Jared will remember where it is, but they found that law enforcement officers, if they've been exposed to a situation or attack or technique even one time, they have a better reaction time under the stress of a fight than someone who's never seen it before. And your brain is just working so fast under stress that the guy begins to do that motion, and your brain says, hey, he's doing X, Y, Z. I learned that at seminar, you got to do this. And it just got a little flash. Getting exposed even one time helps.
Yeah. No, that's the and the way that, that I will always articulate that to people is, and if I'm not going to get into what, a lot of people understand what an OODA loop is, right? Of observe, orientate, decide, and act. And the two ways that you refine your OODA loop is through training or through experience. But as you mentioned, if you get it through experience, it actually accelerates your ability to process things than getting it through training. Obviously, I prefer to get it through training. I don't want to go and get stabbed.
Less bloody.
But if you do experience things, then it actually accelerates the processing of your stimulus response and how you're able to process orientation to a threat and then reacting to it.
Yeah, that's why the realistic scenario trainings, the realistic targets to use, the screens where you have a video of a bad guy and he may give up, he may pull his wallet out of his pocket, he might pull a gun out of his pocket, he might turn away and then draw and come back at you. Those type of things really help ingrain in your nervous system, in the back of the brain, what to do under stress. The other thing I think is, and it's perhaps because of Jared's background, a lot of guys, when they do certain drills, are doing them as fast as they possibly can for entertainment and attention-getting purposes. And if you just entertain it as a show, it looks cool. Yeah. That's fine. But if you're trying to teach people how to defend themselves, you really should be giving them the whole package, and you need the footwork in there. You need why you're doing it this way. And you really need to be honest with your students and more realistic. Don't go for the big shiny fruit. Give them the things they really need. Just my feeling on it.
Well, the thing about Pekiti Tirsia, Tuhon, Jared, you mentioned this, and Tuhon Bill as well, that it's the depth and breadth of Pekiti Tirsia is so vast. I can almost understand why it would be difficult for somebody not to, in some sense, collect the techniques contained within such a deep art, right? So, Tuhon, Jared, how do you manage that tendency in people, given that there is a richness to Pekiti Tirsia? How do you amalgamate those two considerations? One is focusing on the fundamentals and making sure you understand it deeply, but at the same time, there is a rich art to be explored here.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, the way that I like to emphasize that, because when you're teaching a lot on a seminar basis, you've got a very limited time with people, right? I've got 2 days a year with this group, maybe in recent years, 2 days every 2 or 3 years. So I'm trying to give them as much material as I can, but also at the same time, I don't want to give them the kind of the false impression that we shouldn't be hammering in the fundamentals, right? But if I do a 2 days seminar and all I do is a 1 and 2 angle and a couple of footwork patterns the whole weekend, then I'm not giving people what they're wanting. And so I always tell people when I'm at seminars, I'm like, guys, you need to train this stuff. I want you guys to. We're going through this material fast because I'm trying to give you lots of material, but train this stuff. The repetition is the mother of skill. But one thing that I'll always do too at a seminar, and people that attend my seminars will know this, is in keeping with tradition of how I was trained, I'll always begin with footwork. Okay, let's do some footwork, guys, and sometimes depending on my energy levels, I'll hammer it in, and sometimes it might be a little briefer, but I'll always start off with some footwork, and so that people understand this should be the foundation of your training. Learn how to move. Learn how to move first, and then a lot of the other things will start to fall into place. But I like to keep that tradition so that people understand that footwork is important, something that should be the foundation of your training. So I'll always start a seminar, if nothing else, just so people can understand the importance, because it's an easy thing to skip over, right? Footwork. A lot of people, they're not in the art to do footwork, but they don't understand how important it is, because it's just not as fun as swinging sticks and poking knives at people and stuff. So they want to skip over that, but it's really essential. I think it's an essential and oftentimes overlooked part of the art. But anyone that really understands Pekiti Tirsia will know, hey, we don't only emphasize footwork, but if you're training it correct, we're actually good at it too. We're good at, we're known for it. People, very high level instructors of different Filipino martial arts, when they see a Pekiti Tirsia practitioner, they'll say, hey, how long have you been training Pekiti? Because they know how well Pekiti Tirsia practitioners move because of the emphasis we put on certain things, to include footwork.
Tuhon Bill, you're doing a lot of nodding.
Yes, I'm agreeing with everything.
Hopefully you're not falling asleep while I'm talking.
No. I'm agreeing with what you're saying. Tom Biglio is a very good example of that. He would start all his classes back when he was teaching Pekiti with 5-10 minutes of footwork as warm-up. Beginners were doing just footwork. The advanced people were doing footwork with maybe basic strikes, right? Back in the 90s, going back to how teaching styles have changed, one thing, we didn't have good video back then. We had it, but it wasn't great. And it was hard to ship overseas. Back then, I was really rigid, regimented of teaching. If people hired me to do a set of 12 techniques, first set of seguidas, second set contradas, whatever we were teaching, to get the whole 12 in one day of training. My regular days back then were 8 hours. So we do 4 hours, take a lunch break, 4 hours. And then we go out to dinner, and what I would do is come back from dinner, back to the school with the advanced guys, and would finish up with every technique. It was roughly, let's say, one technique per hour. So I'd finish up the last 4 hours doing the last 4 techniques. And I remember I was in a seminar in Germany in the 90s, and we were in the basement of one of the guys' houses, and there were just 3 or 4 guys there. And it was getting late. Oh, Tuhon Bill, it's midnight. We should go. No. And I went over to the door and I locked the door. You can't leave. I'm not done yet. We got one more to go.
Damn.
One poor guy, young guy, was over leaning up against a wall, and he actually fell asleep, and he was like this. And as he slid down the wall, the hood came up over his eyes, and he just out on the floor.
Wow.
But, I was very rigid back then. Honestly, I was very rigid back then because I was trying to teach them the way I learned. Right. And it was very important to me they got the whole material. A transition occurred sometime in the mid-2010 area, something like that, when I started to get things on DVD, and then especially when I got things on downloadable videos. I started to say, you know what? I'm going to teach. First off, I reduced the hours. Once I hit 50, it was very hard to do 8 hours, or especially 12 hours in a day. And I said, all right, I'm going to get through whatever numbers we can, but you're going to learn. I'm going to not go to number 2 until you get number 1 right. I'm not going to go to 3 until you get number 2 right. Whatever get through. I want you to have a good understanding of the technique. And then if you want to learn the rest of it, get the video. The videos you see advertised on my thing, it says $1,000. That's just to keep people who shouldn't get it.
Right.
Forget
it's a security filter.
If you've been through a seminar, you get it for $20.
Okay.
No.
Oh, wow.
Which everyone tells me is very low. But if you look at my video quality compared to what you produce, there's a reason it's only $20.
No, I mean, it's actually priced at $1,000 for the people who.
Yeah, well,
it's a security filter, right?
I originally had stuff as stick mature was $100 and knife mature was $250. Think, no one's going to pay for that. And then we had some crazy guy overseas, right? It was purchased in Israel, paid $250 for a knife tech video. And then the guy's name could be Israeli, could be Arab, I couldn't tell. And it was right when these 2 young girls got their throat cut by an Arab terrorist. So I felt horrible. It was after that. It wasn't
right.
But it still made me worried. I actually contacted the police in Israel and told them what happened in this.
Wow.
So then I upped my prices to $500. And then we had a guy in California buy a whole bunch of stuff for $500 each. I think he spent like $4,000 on videos. So then I upped everything to $1,000. Say, hopefully there's no body crazy enough to buy the videos at $1,000. But the videos are $20. For if you're authorized to buy them, they're only $20. The long story short of that is, guys, I want people to know the technique, but I want them to understand the technique. They're not technique collectors. They should understand the technique. Omar Hakim, who's a very, very sharp guy, he's a IT professional. He told me about something very interesting. He had a theory that probably only the obsidiaria was numbered when Leo learned it. All the advanced material was probably, okay, here's Largo Sagittus, and there may have been 10, 20, 50 things in Largo Sagittus. Leo learning from Conrado, right, his grandfather. Okay, here's medial range Sagittus, and how many are in there? Here's quartal range. And if you guys know Sagittus, I like how Jared does the drill on that, because he's doing it as a rolling flow drill for like Sagangabo. And the reason is my thinking on the third set of Sagittus has changed from teaching it as a stick versus stick drill and a disarm happens, and then you do this choking. The way I look at it now is it's a weapon retention drill. You smack the guy in the hand, and now he's disarmed and he charges in on you, tries to smother you. So then all those techniques and the chokes and everything, the close quarter hits, make a lot more sense to me. Because there's some disarms that Leo gave us in the third set, which are kind of like throwaways. There's one, I forget if it's number 10, where he just grabs a stick and pulls it out of your hand and then goes into chokes. Leo would never do things like that when we're learning the disarms formally. So my theory on a lot of things have changed of how to teach. So Omar's idea is, his theory is, when you ask not only Leo, but a lot of the old timers of that generation, when Leo taught us, they have a hard time with sequencing. When Leo taught us the first set of Sagittus, he gave all 12 in one 6-hour class on a Saturday. It was around 1980 or maybe late 79. And he gave us all 12 of the form, and then would not let us review it with him for 6 months. Oh, you guys work it out. You guys work it out. And then after us struggling, I remembered 1 or 2. Somebody else remembers number 3 and 4, and working out, was it like this or like this? Then he went and said, okay, guys, we're going to review it today. Okay. Oh, good. What was number 3? No. You show me, I'll correct you. And you couldn't, and that was very common with him for years afterward. All the time I'm training with him in the 80s, you get advanced material, and you see him later and ask, Leo, was this number 3 or was this number 4? He didn't remember the sequence well, but he could correct your body mechanics perfectly. He could tell you the technique. Oh, you do it this way because this. If you do it this way, it leaves you open for that attack. And he could do that perfectly. But as far as which was 3, which was 4, which was 5, 1 and 2, 1 and 12, he would remember pretty good. But in the middle was a problem. So Omar thinks when Leo came to the U.S. with that linear thought pattern of Westerners teaching them, he really converted all the advanced material into a straight numbered form. Because a lot of times, I don't know if he was saying this in the 90s, but in the 70s and 80s, his saying after you got a material with him was, you must learn to forget. And it wasn't to forget the technique. It was really to forget the sequence of the technique.
Right.
The sequence is not important. But why this is taught as number 1 and why that is taught as number 2 is not, it's not a progression. It's like an alphabet. You're learning that why A is A and B is B is not really important. As long as you know how to make a letter A and it's different than a letter B, that's the important part. And you know how to use it, and you know when to use a vowel and when to use a consonant. So you were about to ask a question.
Yeah, I was going to note that my understanding is that both the PTI and the PTTA curriculum are very well organized. Is this an evolution, a response to the fact that maybe the way in which it was taught to you wasn't that organized? Are there pros and cons to this level of organization?
I'll go first because I'll be short. I'm surprised. It was the reason PTI is so well organized is because I took good notes. I got to a certain point in my career, and I think it was between the 88 and 89 camps, where I know it was definitely trying to look at Sagittus And Leo gave us I remember the second set, he gave it to us twice. And I took 2 sets of notes, and I couldn't read my notes almost virtually the day after. I couldn't read the things, little distinguishing features. And I know, like, for instance, number 6 in the second set, I'm using Tom Biggio's memory of number 6, because his was much better than what I had in my notes. And then, because I didn't have a nomenclature, somewhere between the 88 and the 89 camp, I was able to make a nomenclature so every single movement had a very definite, easy to remember name. This is a forward 1. This is a circular reverse 1. I could make my notes as DR1, and that was diagonal reverse 1. And it was very easy for me to remember things. So PTI, as far as that's concerned, is simply organized well because I was able to make notes I could read. And I was teaching things in the way I got it. No big claim to fame. I was able to read my notes. That's the big secret to PTI. Right, Jared.
Tuhon, Jared, the purpose for the foundation of the organization in the PTTA curriculum.
Yeah, I mean, is it organized well? Yes, and people like it. Do I think it could be done? It could be better. I actually do. I think this, as the more that I've used the curriculum, the more I've seen things that could be, that could be done better. But the way that it's organized, the way that I learned from Grant Tuhon was there was not a lot of rhyme and reason all the time to it. One time we'd be training and it'd be something, and then we'd change something completely different. A lot of things didn't have names. A lot of things, and so I had to put some structure to that. And so when when eventually I did put that structure to it, and I had, all I could base it on was really how I was taught and the order in which I was taught, because so there are other, and when I say other things that maybe could be changed around, I think maybe for a better flow, possibly. But right. I have to refer to how I was to be kind of true to how I learned the art. And so it's structured based on that. And then after I had created, kind of ratified the curriculum, I actually spent quite a bit of time with Tuhon Kit, Asenas, and because Tuhon Kit is not only a great instructor, but he's a wealth of knowledge. He's done, every time someone would come to the Philippines to train with him, a high-level instructor, a foreigner, he would actually invite them to his school in Makati. He would have them teach his students. He would take notes. He'd do personal training lessons with them, and so he was quite studious in his approach to learning how other people had learned. And so after I had already made the curriculum, Tuhon Kit had back then a mandala. He put his eyes on it and gave some input into things and whatnot. And so I think it's great, but it's not perfect, but it does help people to learn. And the way that I always will tell people, there's a lot more to the art than what I have in this curriculum. There's a lot more. What this curriculum provides is a finite way for people to learn. And I'll tell people this curriculum here, this is, if I'm building a house, I got to lay a foundation and I got to build a frame, right? That's where I start. And so that's what this curriculum is. This is going to give you a foundation. It's going to be, I'm going to give you a frame. But the process of filling that frame in, putting up drywall and painting and so on and so forth, that's a lifetime process. And you should be, because there's so much to this art, you can just keep learning. And so our curriculum is it's intentionally finite because we want people to be able to have realistic goals they can achieve. And even as a finite curriculum, it's a lot of material. So, but if someone says, I am a practitioner of Pekiti Tirsia Kali, they should have certain skill sets, and that's what we hope to provide in that curriculum, and then encourage them to just keep learning.
Right. My understanding through my exposure with a PTTA and my exposure to PTI is a little bit limited, although folks like Tuhon, Jack Latorre, Coach Danny Terrell, they're great resources. In fact, sometimes I'd release a video of me doing a move, and I know those two are going to reply with where that falls in the PTI curriculum. So incredibly organized. Tuhon, Jared, it seems that you rely on a board, on community input into this PTTA curriculum thing. Talk to us about Talk to about that.
Yeah, I mean, the PTTA grew organically. It's not something that I had, I wish I had planned it from the get-go because it might be a little bit better structured, but it grew organically. And the charter was originally Grand Tuhon, and this is going back to, I believe it was 2002. And he told me, I want you to be over this tactical group, and I want you to just teach police and military. And because that back then, that's from 2002 to 2005 is where I started doing a lot of one. I was a full-time police academy instructor, so I was developing an actual curriculum for my police department. And two, I got a contract during that time for an Army Special Forces unit, so I was training Special Forces soldiers. So most of my focus was that area, and that was my who I was training. That evolved as I realized there was a demand outside of that small niche for people that wanted to learn these methods, and so the PTTA grew organically, into the way it, and I didn't really originally, I didn't want it to be hey, this is Jared's organization and this is Jared's way of doing things. I wanted it to be an input from a credible group of instructors that could be, and I wanted it to become a medium for other instructors to become to gain some recognition for the great instructors they are, maybe hopefully provide some ways for other instructors to grow their schools, to teach seminars, so on and so forth. And I realized that I have my strengths and my knowledge in the art, but there are a lot of other instructors that I was rubbing shoulders with that also had that great the great way of teaching and ways that they even those that learned directly from me teach it in a way that is unique to them. And so I wanted to kind of provide a more of a community approach to that.
Would you name names in that regard?
Absolutely, and I'll name a few because there's a lot, and I don't want to miss any. But,
I'm sorry.
Some of my more senior ones, I guess. We've got Mandala Jason Jones, you've got Mandala Lamont Glass, you've got Mandala Ray Smith, you've got Mandala Johannes Renninghoff, you've got Mandala Lars Helms, you've got Mandala John Frankhusen, and to name a few, and
right.
and I could just keep going on and on.
Yes.
And with that list, obviously Tuhon Kit. Mandala Patch, Caballero in the Philippines. So it's just an exhaustive list, and every one of these people, I feel confident in saying, "Hey, I know you've come to train with me, but you're going to spend 4 hours training." And we're talking about conference level stuff where we've got like a week with people, and I actually give them the limelight and give them an opportunity to teach. And I think that is it's good for the student. And it's good for the organization, and
absolutely,
I think it's just healthy,
Yeah, and I know the last PTI camp was headlined by Tuhon, Jack Latorre, and I believe Coach Danny. If I'm not missing anybody,
I'm sitting here, nodding like a bobblehead at everything Jared's saying, because not only is what he's saying morally correct, is correct in a business sense, it's correct in a teaching sense, it's correct in a what. You were mentioning with Kit of bringing people in and learning from each other. That's the smart way to do it. And I'm trying to get through to some of the old timers who are just so stubborn. The best business people are not egotistical. They'll learn from each other. They'll learn from their group. And it's really, okay, two quick things. When I had the first big summer camp for Tirsia, for PTI in '96, afterwards we went to my house, and it was either '96 camp or '97 camp, but we had Phil came into the '96 camp, Phil Galinas, and Guru Dan was there, and we had a meeting at my house, and I was still under Leo then. I was the official head of PTI, the official only Tirsia organization back then, right? The first thing I knew to do, just when everyone sat at my house and we're sitting around my dinner table, right in the next room, and I asked everybody, okay, guys, I want you to tell me what I'm doing right, what I'm doing wrong, but it's going to be the most helpful to me if you tell me what I'm doing wrong first. Go. And most of them sat there and didn't know what to say because they were being polite. Danny is Mr. Diplomacy. Say anything impolite. But Mike Papalizio, who's very blunt, Bill, bump. And really, if you are a smart businessman, teacher, if you have a goal of being better at whatever you're doing, you don't surround yourself with yes men. You surround yourself with intelligent devil's advocates who can go and say, I think this is wrong. I think you made a mistake here. And this is where I think it's probably better if you go this way. These days, that's my wife. I'm sure Jared has the same thing. He'll tell you when you're wrong. But I read a series of books in the 80s. The first one was In Search of Excellence by a guy named Tom Peters. And this was a business consultant for one of the big business consultant groups at the time, Anderson Consulting, I think it was. And a whole slew of books after that. But the first one was In Search of Excellence. And it was how the best CEOs and best judged by how successful their businesses were, what did they do right, and what advice would they give? And I really encourage every martial artist to do that.
What was the name of that book again, Tuhon Bill?
In Search of Excellence by Tom Peters.
Got it.
And everyone reads Musashi's Book of Five Rings. Everyone reads Lao Tzu's Art of War. Go read In Search of Excellence, because that will tell you not just how to run a business, but to do anything dealing with human beings, how to work with human beings to make yourself better, make your organization better. And it's being as open-minded as Jared was talking about what he does and what he says Kit does. You have to get input. Don't have yes men around you. That is the death of an organization.
That is fantastic advice, Tuhon Bill. Now, guys, we're approaching 1.5 hours of this podcast, so let's wrap it up with this question. Where would you like to see Pekiti Tirsia, the state of the art, not particularly just your organization, the state of Pekiti Tirsia 10 years from today?
I would like to see, I keep going first, but I'm oldest, that's my prerogative.
Yes.
I would like to see all the different organizations get along nicely. Just be polite to each other. It's not war. There are 7 billion people on this planet. There's enough students to go around. It's not wise to make war with each other. It's not good for your students. It's not good for business. It's not good for martial arts in general. It's not wise in the long run. It's not important when you look at the other problems the world has. There's a whole bunch of reasons. I would like to see everyone simply be polite with each other and just you can be competitive, be a friendly competitive, have sportsmanship. You can learn a lot from each other, even if they don't have the same technique you do, but they might teach a cool thing in a cool way that you could apply to what you have. Don't be closed-minded. Don't be stubborn. Just be honest and be open-minded. That would be what I'd like to see people do in the future. Jared, on to you.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I would look at that in 2 ways. One is internally within within Pekiti Tirsia, harmony, and healthy fostering of brotherhood within the art, because just because I teach one way doesn't mean there's not other ways. And I teach this in general with combatives, defensive tactics. There's lots of it should be based on results, right? And there's lots of ways that can work, not just the way that I teach it. And so be open-minded about that. That there's just because someone teaches it a different way from you doesn't mean it make it wrong. It makes it different, right? The other thing too is outside of the Pekiti Tirsia extended family, I'd like to see a little bit more credit to the art and more, I guess, recognition and notoriety. I mean, if you hear certain names within the martial arts world, just the name itself, it has recognition and has marketing value. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, big one. Muay Thai, Krav Maga. I'd like to see, hopefully one day, where Pekiti Tirsia receives the recognition for what it has offered and continues to offer the martial arts community.
Fantastic. Gentlemen, it's been a pleasure speaking with you. I hope the people listening to this take the opportunity to attend this historic collaboration. Now, even though it hasn't happened, I have a feeling this won't be the last time that it will. Would you agree?
Oh, yeah, we'll do it again.
First of many, and I think hopefully this will kind of maybe set a standard.
Absolutely, gentlemen. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you
guys.
Appreciate you.
Thank you, everybody, for watching. Have a good night.
Good night.